Me to do just sit
Yes.
Yep, just relax.
anyhow which way, huh?
Yeah.
You're fine.
Okay.
Okay.
This is an interview at the Division of Military Naval Affairs Headquarters, Latham, New York, 31st of August, 2004, approximately 2:30 p.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Catherine Boyagian, born in Albany, 8/8/23.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to
Second year
heading
high.
service? Okay. Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, it was in the Palace Theater, and I was coming out and they had an extra, a paper that said that Pearl Harbor had been bombed late at night.
Do you remember your reaction to that, or?
No, it was stunning, you know, we were stunned.
Okay. Now you, of course, enlisted. Why did you enlist at
Well,
all? And
my two brothers went, and then my sister went, and then my boyfriend went, and so I went. We all went together.
okay, why did you pick the Army?
Well, everybody in my family was in the Army.
Okay. When did you enlist?
I enlisted in November '44.
Okay. Where did you
I
go?
left December.
Okay. Where did you go for basic training, and can you tell us
I
about
went
it?
to Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, and that's where I had my basic. And,
How long was your basic training?
I don't remember. I don't remember how, it was 60 years ago.
Okay. Now, did you, they didn't teach you how to fire a rifle or
No,
anything, did they?
we didn't have any guns,
Uh-huh.
women didn't have guns then.
Okay. How was the training? Was it hard? Were
No, I enjoyed it. I liked it, I wasn't crazy about my sergeant.
Did you get homesick at all?
No, first time I was away from home.
Uh-huh.
Never left New York until I went into the Army.
How was the food in basic training?
It was good. Well, the first meal I didn't like, it was some kind of steak or something. But actually, I'm used to whatever food. I grew up in the Depression, so we weren't used to, anything, just anything.
Did they issue you some kind of fatigue type uniform that you
Yes.
had to wear?
We had green fatigue pants, and we had and shirt, and we had a seersucker dress with the bloomers that went with it.
Uh-huh.
That was for working or exercising, and then we had summer uniform, khaki, and a olive drab winter.
Okay, when you were wearing your fatigue uniform, what kind of hat did they give you?
We had a little cap, like I think they called it a golf hat. I don't know. It was like I don't know what kind. It wasn't,
It wasn't like a baseball
no,
hat?
no, wasn't.
Okay.
And we had boots. We called them Little Abners.
Uh-huh.
We call them combat boots now.
Now, what kind of living quarters were you in? The Quonset huts, or?
No, we had big barracks.
Barracks?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a lot of girls in one room. We
Were
were
you,
all
were you in
together.
bunk beds?
Yes, and I always got the top.
Was that by choice?
No, I don't know. I'm congenial, so whatever I had, I had. I had a lot of brothers and sisters to live with, so whatever pet I had.
After you were at Fort Oglethorpe in Georgia, where did you go?
After that, we went to Des Moines, Iowa, and I had schooling there for office skills.
Now, did you have that type of training in high school also?
Yes, I did, but I didn't work at that. I worked in a department store because I liked sales. That's what I liked.
All right, do you remember how long you were in Iowa?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't remember any of those lengths of time.
Where did you go after that?
Well, when we got done with Iowa, we got our orders, which were supposed to be secret. Nobody could tell where they were going. And because everybody knew where I was going, because I wanted to go back to New York, and I had a smile on my face.
Now, whereabouts in New York did you go?
And I went to, we took the train back, which had men and women both servicemen and women on the train coming back.
Mhm.
Because you always travel by train. And when you got anywhere you were going, you traveled by truck. And I went to the Brooklyn Navy Yard to get my assignment. And then they assigned me to the Fort Hamilton, Port of Embarkation. And they put me in there, and a Jeep took us there. And then they put me in the commissary, because I worked in sales when I was. And the officers bought all their supplies there, and they had to have ration stamps for anything in that, on gas or food, certain foods, you had a ration stamp.
Could you explain your duties and some of the duties you had while you were there?
Well, it was just, it was a store, so I just cashiered and stocked, and that's what I did in the commissary.
Now, you mentioned that you became ill from some of the shots you had?
Yes. Well, any ship that came in there was ships coming in. And they would bring soldiers back that were, GIs back that were ill and wounded, and they'd bring sickness back. So we had to get a shot for that sickness. And one time I got very ill from that shot. And they didn't know what it was. So I was in the hospital for 3 days. But that was at another camp. That was at Camp Shanks. But at Hamilton, we had ships coming in the Narrows, and they were the wounded coming back. They came in the Narrows of Brooklyn, and then we'd go down and watch them come off and greet them, and some of the wounds were really serious wounds. And this one ship that came in, they took the soldiers, the GIs, and they put them on a bus in their pajamas, in the robes, and they took them in. They thought they were going to the hospital. They took them into New York City to a nightclub, and we met them there. And then we paired off with the wounded soldier, and we had dinner and cocktails, and lots of stars were there, And then so then they put them back on the bus, and they went back to the hospital.
Do you remember who some of the stars were?
Wonderful, yes, Eddie Canner, and Ed Calloway and Pearl Bailey and Milton Berle. He was our waiter. And he didn't like the women to have the liquor. And then he had the man who discovered penicillin was there.
Oh, Jonas Salk?
Yeah, no, that was
polio.
Oh, polio, okay.
Fleming.
Fleming.
Yeah, he was there. I think that time the Army, the services only had penicillin. And the needles were huge, and they were painful. If you had them for 3 days and 3 nights, you had to find another spot. But, so that was a good homecoming for those boys, I thought.
Now, you mentioned in this form that you worked with Italian POWs and German POWs.
No, I didn't work with Germans.
Oh,
we weren't
okay.
allowed to fraternize or talk to the Germans, but I did work with the Italians in the commissary. And, they would do the bags and just whatever you do in the store. And then they'd go in the back and they'd play their little mandolin or whatever and sing their Italian songs. And they were all young too. They were young. But the Germans worked on the grounds, but you couldn't have anything to do with them. And they had big barracks just like we did. And they would bring them into the movies and the boxing matches. They would bring them in first, and then the guards, and then we would sit in the back. So they were treated very well, I thought.
Was the area where they were fenced in at all?
No, I didn't know, because I rode through it on a bike once. They had to go down to the bank, and I was told not to, but it was a shortcut. So, but they didn't bother you, So I rode down, and it wasn't fenced in. But the camp was, the fort was fenced in with the guards and everything. So, where would they go?
Yes. Now, I noticed you said that with the girls that you were served with, that you became close. One of them was an artist.
Yes. Dorothy Norman, she was an artist, and she would draw cartoons for the paper.
Do you know which paper?
Well, it was our post paper.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes she'd say, stick your leg out or stick your arm out, and that's when my hand or leg got in some of the cartoons. She was pretty good. And while I was there also, we would get telegrams, you know, the girls would get telegrams about their husbands and their boyfriends and their brothers that were killed, you know. But they stayed on duty. And you know, they were broken up, but they stayed on duty. And I gotten two telegrams. But my brother was wounded twice, so at least he got home. But my boyfriend was fatally wounded, so I went home to his wake, his funeral. He was wounded in Okinawa, last battle of the war. And then I took overseas training. I was going overseas. We were going to go to France. And some of the WACs were coming back from France, and they had been shot by snipers.
Really?
Yeah, they had, you know, the war was over then, but they had the snipers, and they would shoot the Americans, and the WACs were coming back that had been shot, but they had lace and perfume to ease their pain.
You also said one of the things that left an impression on you was a reception at the W.A.C. mansion.
Yes, for Jonathan Wainwright, General Jonathan. He was in the Bataan Death March, and he was very skinny. They called him skinny there. And two of us WACs were given invitations to it. And we just went and greeted him and saw him talk. And it's, you know, it's vague. That's all I remember about that.
Now, you mentioned you were at Camp Shanks. How long were you
Yes,
there?
well, when I came back from the funeral for my boyfriend, I was supposed to go overseas. But when I got back, they transferred me to Shanks. That was in New York, outside of Nyack. I'm not sure. It was in the woods. And so they transferred me there.
Now, what did you do there?
And there I worked in the Special Orders Gadgeting Division.
Okay.
And we did typing, and we did the orders and promotions and awards, transfers. We typed them, we proofread them, and we mimeographed them. And sometimes I went on the night shift. And so that's what I did there. And then we had the American soldiers coming back, American prisoners of war coming back. And so we had to do their papers to get them to separation centers. And I talked to a lot of those men that came back, and they had, you know, some needed plastic surgery because they were prisoners. And they had internal wounds that you couldn't see, but they had lots of infirmities. So I talked to some of them. And while I was there, they sent me to New York, ported in one of the piers in New York City because the Queen was coming in, the Queen Mary. And it was bringing a lot of the GIs back. And so the two of us WACs from my camp went on a little tug as one of the escort ships for the Queen Mary. And it was lined with soldiers, lined with them. And they were waving little flags, captured flags, you know. It was a sight. We were little. They were, so the Queen was you. But that was a sight. I always remember that sight. That was beautiful.
Now, what rank were you at that point?
I was a PFC.
Okay.
I never got higher. I was a PFC. So I did that. And also, I met my mother. I went to meet my mother in Grand Central Station. And while I was there was a big crowd and a lot of people roaring. And so I was waiting with my mother, and the crowd pushed me, and they pushed me and pushed me until I was at the head of the crowd and right into General Eisenhower, Supreme Commander. I just looked, and he just looked, and that was it, you know.
Now, were you in uniform?
Yes, I was in uniform, because I recognized him. He had a little Eisenhower jacket on. So I saw him. I didn't really meet him. But
Did you salute him?
no, I didn't know. I was so amazed, you know, to see the Supreme Commander. So, you know, that was pretty good. But when I was at Camp Shank, that's when I got ill from the shots, because the ships would come in, and some of the soldiers would be, you know, had diseases they brought back from Europe. And so we'd get shots. And so I was sent to, I got very sick. I got black in here. They didn't know what it was. And so the Army had taken over a wing of Rockland State Psychiatric Hospital. And so that's where we went. And like bars on the windows and buttons for the faucets and everything, you know. And I had 3 days of penicillin and 3 nights of that. And so that was an experience too. And then I was back on duty, and I talked to a lot of the prisoners that came back. And the one prisoner I went out with a few times and eventually married him, you know. He had a lot of problems, which I didn't know at the time. But I didn't look at anything. See? I didn't look at
You didn't have
anything.
to.
No, I didn't. Oh, another thing is we had a lot of troops coming in and out, and so they would come into our barracks. We couldn't lock our doors, and so they would come in the barracks, you know. And so they issued us baseball bats for protection. That was our weapon.
Did you ever have to use it?
No, but our cooks were pretty tough. They would get after them. But you couldn't lock the doors, you know, so
Yeah.
they would come in. They were coming back. They were a long time in Europe, you know. So,
Now, you stayed in service until May of,
February.
February of 46?
February of 46. And then I married, and then he got out.
You married while you were in service?
Yeah, I married that one of the prisoners of war, and he got out first. And he was sent to the separation center. Then he came back and he worked in one of the shops there. So eventually I got married, and then I got discharged, put in for the discharge.
Where were you discharged?
Camp, it's New Jersey, Fort Dix.
Okay.
And that's the first time I got a plate of beans. They always said you're going to get beans in the Army, and I never got any till I went to Fort Dix. That was funny.
Were you eligible at all for the GI Bill?
Pardon me?
Were you eligible for the GI Bill?
Well, oh, you mean schooling?
Yeah.
Yes, you were, but I didn't. I went back to my job in the department store, which I liked.
So you started back right away, or?
Yeah, well, not right away, because I had some children, and then when they started school, I went back part-time in my department.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service
I
with you?
got letters from girls and some of the men, and saying what they were doing, you know. But then that dropped off there for a while, you know, after a while.
Now, when you were able to, did you ever join any veterans organizations?
I never did, no. I don't know if the W.A.C, well, hey, you got children, you're busy, you know. I did go to went to the thing in Washington, you know, the memorial dedication, I went to that. I brought my pictures of my husband and my brothers, you know, and put them up and took the picture, because they couldn't get there. They're all ill now, so they can't go.
How do you think your time in service affected or changed your life?
Well, I was young, you know, just used to having fun and, you know, doing stuff like that. And then you went into the service and you saw all these things that happened to other people, you know. The guys coming back all wounded and, you know, no limbs, some of them. It kind of shook you up. So I never forgot that hospital ship. I always think of that. And I never forgot the Queen Mary, you know. Those two ships stay in my mind.
You sent these to us. Could you if you just hold them up like this, tell us when and where those were taken?
Oh, this one was taken in Georgia. And
In 1944, would that have been?
probably 45.
45?
And then this one was taken in New York, up in Bear Mountain. And I had some time off.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for your interview.
Hey, and I didn't cough.
Not once.